The past 7 days started with a long walk joined by one brave and very open podcasting great, as well as 2 longer than intended discussions with 2 more amazing creative souls. 1 4.5-mile walk, and a walk that the route planner says was about 8 kilometres. That is around 7 miles, and I felt like it was more. The second walk started at 20 degrees centigrade and ended at 27 degrees centigrade. That's from 68 degrees Fahrenheit up to 80.6 Fahrenheit for the Americans. I apologise, but I went for an intro all about numbers for some reason. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this is Pods Like Us Chronicles. On Sunday, I went for a walk that was around an hour and 10 minutes, give or take, including stopping at the shop a few minutes away from home to pick up an orange juice. During the walk, I listened to the first 2 episodes of a new podcast entitled Bad Blood, Life of a Cancer. In the podcast, the podcaster and podcasting producer extraordinaire Jamie East tells us about being diagnosed with leukemia, CML to be precise, chronic myeloid leukemia, which is very rare. Now, it came about through a complete accident as well, that he was having this test for something else that he thought that he'd got, and it turned out to be this, which seems apparently to be a thing that happens a lot of the time. In the first episode, which was called The Phone Call, you actually get the phone call. He leads up to it explaining about this sort of thing that was going on in his throat, and he wanted to know what it was about. And then the phone call was recorded, the original one, so you get the actual natural reactions and everything. It's an incredibly open podcast, I will say that. Not a show to listen to with family because he's brutally honest and he does use some curse words, understandably. In the first episode, he tells us about the phone call, and it shifts then to a year later where he tells us about the initial shock that he'd got and things that happened around that time. And he speaks openly in that episode about the fear and uncertainty that he had at that point, the emotional impact on himself and to his family and the friends around him, as well as people that he works with. It sets the series up in a very honest and open way, which I think is really brave. I think it's an important show for people to listen to, and I've been recommending it to people since as well. In episode 2, he looked at what CML actually is and gave us details about what it was and got specialists with him to discuss it. He described the realities practically with the diagnosis and the appointments that he's got to have with lots of specialists. He gives us the difference between NHS care and private care because luckily he gets private care through his employment, through his work. He also describes when they do the bone marrow biopsy, the needle is quite big. It's really big, and he explains it. And it's painful putting it in there through the bone to get to the marrow. And he's brutally honest about that as well. I've used brutally honest quite a bit in this description. It interestingly carries the story on and gives us a bit more detail. And one takeaway was that his humour has remained intact because throughout these first 2 episodes that came out that weekend, they show his use of humour. I don't know whether it's deflect as such, but it's just keeping his sanity in place, I believe. I think that's what it is mostly. I'm not sure that if he would say that. I will find out because I'm chatting with him over the next week to discuss this. I can't praise this podcast enough. I think that everybody needs to go out and hear it. It's essential listening. On Sunday, the 5th of July, I read an article on Substack by Audio Drama News where they were discussing something called DTRM, which is Down the Road Media, which is a sort of resource, and we're going to get into that, that's been founded by a surprise guest that I've got right now to speak with, Talib Jasir, who a lot of people, especially Tony Doe and people like that, will know from the Fussings, a superb romantic comedy, would you call it, Talib?
Sure. It's actually a Black American romance comedy. And it's a limited series that I did in 2017.
It's interesting because it's like a journey in a sense where you've got that, and that would lead to the work that you then started when you founded Afros and Audio, the community for Black podcasters and storytellers. And then we'll carry on from there. But it's a natural progression from one to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something about life in general, is that sometimes you don't know what you do at one point in time that will lead into the next. And so I call it unfolding, just kind of moving into your life and allowing it to unfold. You don't know the people that you'll meet. You don't know the opportunities that will come. You don't even know the pivots that are around the corner, which is what happened with Afros and Audio. So when I created the Fussings, Until One of Us is Dead is the subtitle.
Yes.
It was a rom-com, and when I looked around, I wanted to find more people that looked like me because I felt like it was a unique experience. Podcasting, this distribution platform, knowing the golden era radio in the U.S., and that was during the 20s and the 50s, where people that looked like me were not a part. We weren't allowed to be a part of that era of audio storytelling, audio scripted fiction. And so when I did it in 2017, I was like, wait a minute, this is such a unique opportunity for us to be, for anyone, I mean, not just myself, but for anyone to create audio fiction in a way in which we did, which the way they did in Golden Era Radio. So I feel like we are in our golden era when it comes to podcasting and audio dramas.
Absolutely. I mean, I've spoken with the Black British creator of audio drama, Liam, who created the Icarus Complex. Mm-hmm. And he's a really good friend of mine. In fact, I provided one of the voices for one of the characters in that before now.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what I like about his work and what you've done as well is, and it's the same with if you get women creating and other people, all these different aspects to it, different people of different colours, different races, different genders, is good for the podcasting world because it gives something, I think, that has more to it, more substance to it than most media.
Absolutely.
Because most media is still controlled by, I mean, I'm sat here and by white males, unfortunately, but it's nice to have the openness that podcasting and audio drama allows us to have.
Sure. There's so much diversity in podcasting in general. Obviously, there's still more percentage that isn't diverse, but it's an opportunity. It really is. And for me, podcasting, aside from audio dramas, is all of us laying down a living record for who we are, what we're experiencing right now, what we think, what we believe. That's important work beyond the monetization, beyond, this industry, so to speak. The fact that we as people are laying down a living record for who we are in this moment is so important when it comes to podcasting. And so when I founded Afros and Audio, it was for audio dramas because I was trying to create support and resources for that. And then because the market wasn't at all where it is today, I had to pivot, to all podcasts. Yep. And that's where you had the 7-year conference that happened. But I still feel like podcasting as a distribution and a medium is so important. But the other piece, and I'll land it here, is that there could be no podcast industry without podcasters, without podcasts.
Yes.
It literally doesn't exist without us as content creators and independent creators. As much as the celebrity and the wealthy and all those get the highest, accolades and visibility, the independent creators are the engine of podcasting. And so I feel like as much as, as you mentioned, those people at the top who have the power and the money, if they don't at some point recognize the engine of the car, of what runs this vehicle, then, it's going to be an issue. And I feel like in one industry, as we are actively developing podcasting, we are as content creators, we are actively developing and evolving it even now. One industry, entertainment media, has to benefit the content creator. Yeah. And so I'm an advocate for that. Industry aside, I'm the advocate for the people and the power that we have and the content that we create. And we've got to be the ones to stand up for the equity and the opportunities. We have to demand it in a way, because we can also dismantle this whole thing by taking our content away from it. Not that will happen, unfortunately, but we could do that. We have that type of power if we understood it.
Okay, we have a minute for a bit of a tangent that leads into then, okay, which is that.
Sure.
So I went to the podcast show in London this year, and I got carried away with that a little bit because it was my first podcast show that I'd been to, any event to do with podcasting. I got carried away because there was one talk that came up, and while I was sat in this talk, it was for a show called Digging It. Mm-hmm. Which is presented by Joe Wiley and Zoe Ball, who are presenters. They've been television presenters and radio presenters for many years. And I went in there, and then as soon as it started, I suddenly thought, what can an independent podcaster get out of a show that has a huge production team behind it and all of this expense and all of this equipment and all this, that and the other? And I just suddenly thought, is there anything that we can get from that? And the only thing I got from that was the rapport between the two presenters. And that's the thing that I think, podcast shows where you've got more than one presenter, you've got to have that back and forth between them.
Absolutely.
Because it is that pulls the listener in, the presenters, whether you've got the production or anything else to it. I still believe that first and foremost, is the person behind the microphone or the person that's creating it that is the most important thing.
Absolutely. I totally agree. There is folks who do it well, and there are folks who, are learning how to do it well.
Yes.
And there are folks who could care less and just want to get on the mic and press record and do whatever with no quality assurance or control at all. But there's room for all of them, I believe. And I believe there's also celebrity podcasts 4 or 5 years ago allowed us to stop saying what a podcast is, as independents. Now everyone knows. Now most people are listening, but we're still here, the independents. And it's important to see possibility in what folks like them are doing.
Yep.
Because they're doing it, we can also achieve such heights or be where we are. Independent content is always a good thing as well. There's no gatekeepers. There's no one telling you what you can and can't say on the mic. There's a case for all of it. And I think all of us who really love podcasting want this to be viable for a very long time. And it's going to take all of us.
That's a good tangent. Going from that then, you've done the Afros and audio community. And it seems like a natural development to me then of your creative life, in a sense, because you've gone from the show, the Fussings, I forgot the rest of the subtitle again.
Yeah, that's fine. The Fussings until one of us is dead.
So, like I said, so that led from there to Afros and audio, which I think has led to this next thing that we're going on about, which is down the road media, where you're targeting an area that you've said before in public that you think there's a gap there in the world of audio media, in podcasting. In other forms of media, such as film and television, scripted audio writing, you have that sort of sustainability there where you've created one show and then you've got that backing there to be able to help you to keep going. Whereas with audio podcast, and I agree with you on this, is you get that one show and it could be an amazing show or it could not go as well as you think it will. And over the years, it will be picked up and lots of people will listen to it. Mm-hmm. But you as a creator, because you've got nothing backing you, it's hard to then go and say, right, my next project, and you've got to start again almost from scratch. Whereas what you're looking at here with Down the Road Media is something to help these people and to give them that strength and that backing to say, yep, you can do this, and we are here to help you if you need any help with any of it.
Absolutely. I think, and I mentioned this earlier, there's so much power in people. Yeah. And one of the things that Afros in Audio created for 7 years was this commitment to community and collaboration. And so what you saw in that was folks finding each other.
Yep.
Supporting each other. I'm a big proponent of mastermind communities and folks who seek support. There's a thing about creatives where we are isolated. We can isolate ourselves. We can be in silos a lot of the time. And that thing that we've been looking to do or figure out for 3 months, someone has already figured it out. And if you ask, they can say, oh, just push that button right here. And you're like, damn it, where were you 3 months ago? you know? And so that's the importance of communities, first and foremost. The second thing is that where there are pipelines for audio drama, meaning Audible and other bigger companies who have started to acquire audio dramas, there are pipelines, but there's not necessarily infrastructure. There's not support. There's not this way for voice actors to find each other readily, producers, directors, sound designers, all those folks to find each other directly. We might be in 3 or 4 different directories, but do I know that you voiced audio drama? I don't know that. But if you were in Down the Road Media, right, I'll know that. You're here because you want to actively work in audio drama. And I think that's important because it's hard when you don't have support. It's hard when you don't have backing. It's hard when you don't have folks to say, just push that button right there, And so what I've created with Down the Road Media is, one, it takes me back to what I was trying to create in 2018. Yeah. But the technology wasn't there, nor the market. So now that the technology is caught up with where my big vision was, now you have the opportunity to reach out, the directory, the project management aspect of it, the forum, to be able to have those conversations and the communication, talk about craft in a way that we don't normally do. Talk about the award circuit, because there is one, for audio dramas. And the more that you understand it, the better off you can be to position and present what it is that you're doing. So it's all of these things, just me as a creator, and I'll land it here. As a creator first, that's what's sustained and been where my focus is always creator-centric. Because I'm a creator. I'm not a person looking from the outside in trying to give opportunities or present something for people. I am that person. Yeah. I was that person in Afros and Audio. I'm that person in Down the Road Media that understands what it is that we need. But I also talk to my people. I'm a policy major. We learn that you don't go to a community and project on them what you think they need. You ask them what they need, and they'll tell you.
Absolutely.
And so that's what Down the Road Media is about. Absolutely,
because as you said, you are somebody that's on the inside looking and saying, oh, this is what needs to be done. And that's the best way to do it, is for the people that are actually using these or that work in this to actually say, this is what we need. Let's see what we can do about that. So how far along are you with getting Down the Road Media up and running, and how can people find it?
Oh, it's up and running. It's available. It's launched. There is the audio drama discovery piece, whereas you can go to the front page and you'll see right away audio dramas that you can listen to. And what I love about that is that I've had conversations, and you'll see on Down the Road Media, there's a resource page where there are conversations, interviews that I've done with audio drama creators. And one of the things that comes out is that, listen, we don't have anything that presents us like a Netflix or Spotify or anything that we're inside of those. We're inside of those, those platforms. But if I say podcast out in the regular world, no one immediately thinks audio drama.
No.
At all. So it's like, how do we create a space and then where they're readily available, they're readily seen, and it's inquisitive. You're looking at artwork and art in shows that are just like presented like any other platform, and it's intriguing. Oh, I like that artwork. I see the description. I can press play and listen to this. And I've tried this and tested out with people who've never heard of audio dramas. I've had to explain audio dramas to people.
Wow.
Or people who didn't listen to it, and they come to Down the Road Media where those shows are, and they're like, wow, I didn't even know this existed. I didn't even know, that I could push play on something like this and listen to it. And I believe that audio drama has the potential to be the next on-demand mainstream source of entertainment.
Yep.
But it's up to us. Both in creation and consumption, I believe that we have an opportunity here. It's up to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, let people know how they can find you and get hold of you then, please, Talib.
Sure. Downtheroad.media, please check it out. There's a free version. There's membership, directory, and creator ecosystem for the site. You can find me at Talib Jasir on Instagram, Talib Jasir on LinkedIn, and at Afros and Audio on Instagram.
Thank you very much, Talib. Thank you.
Thank you.
On Monday this week, the 6th of July, a trailer appeared in my feed for the third season of Central Intelligence, a Goldhawk production for the BBC about the history of the CIA, hence Central Intelligence. So, because it's one of my favourite recent audio dramas, I thought I'd try and catch a few minutes with the director and one of the writers of the show, John Scott Dryden. Thanks for speaking with me today, John.
That's a pleasure. Just to clarify, I'm not the writer of the series. It's written by Greg Hadrick, who is an Australian writer. He's been obsessed with the CIA for years and years. I think he's been working on this for about 10 years, and he literally goes through every declassified document he can find. He just knows everything about it. So I would not want to take credit for...
Okay.
But I'm the sort of director of the show and executive producer.
I was getting confused because you did write the fantastic Passenger List that you also directed, and that's an incredible show in itself.
Thank you.
So my thing with Central Intelligence is that it's really interesting how it's put together, because it's taken all of these true stories from the history of the CIA and put them in a sort of dramatized version, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I mean, is the character that Kim Cattrall plays, is that based on a real person?
Yeah, she plays Eloise Page, who was a real person. She died, I think, in the early 2000s. And she's an extraordinary character because she was there right at the beginning of the formation of the CIA, just after the war. Yeah. And retired, I think, in the 80s, but was one of the most senior figures in the CIA, and certainly the most senior woman at the time, because it was a very male-dominated organization. I think she was the first station chief in the CIA. And it's interesting that the story of the CIA, there's a lot of characters that are sort of mythologized, but they're all male, and some of the female characters have been kind of written out of that history. Yeah. I guess at the end of the day, she was an agent and a spy, so not a lot is known about them because of what they do. She was a very important character in the CIA, and I think perhaps isn't celebrated as much as men in the organization. So she takes you through the story. She narrates Central Intelligence, and I think she's a great way in for the audience because she is an insider, but she's also an outsider in a sense, being a woman, and often underestimated within the CIA itself. As her influence grew within the CIA, a lot of other women came through as well. And as we get into season 3, which we launch tomorrow, there's more sort of strong female characters in the story, which started off almost entirely male, has now become much more female as well. It's a little bit Mad Men, it's got that sort of vibe,
Yeah. She sort of reminded me in a sense of Peggy from Mad Men.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very much.
Because there's a similarity there in them starting as an assistant, in a sense, in an administrative way, and then building up really quickly to becoming something so much more and being important to the running of the business, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And in the 60s, season 3 deals with the presidency of LBJ. And the CIA has become much more of a huge organization with agents and offices in all sorts of different parts of the world. Whereas in the first 2 seasons of our story, it was much more of a sort of amateur. They were just trying stuff out, and crazy about it. There wasn't really too much of a strategy. But as it grew, and certainly this is the period we're covering in season 3, it's become much more of a kind of machine of the state.
Another thing we've got to look forward to in season 3, the great Ed Harris did such an incredible job of acting as the really famous Alan Dulles, who was originally director of the CIA for many years. And now, because at this point that we're coming to in the 1960s with Lyndon B. Johnson and onwards, Alan had retired. We now have a new director of the CIA who is another incredible actor that you've got hold of for the show.
Yeah, that's almost right. So Kelsey Grammer plays President LBJ, who's a big character in season 3, so not director of the CIA. And during that period, it was almost like revolving doors. There were lots of directors of the CIA. the obvious person to be the director of the CIA was Richard Helms, who had been there right from the beginning and had worked under Alan Dulles, who's played by Johnny Flynn, who's a brilliant actor in our series. But he's, I guess, not quite trusted at that point. So they bring in various kind of colonels and generals who don't really understand the CIA. And Richard Helms was deputy to them. So there were several CIA directors who had varying successes. Some were total disasters before Richard Helms eventually gets the top job, which is during LBJ's presidency. But it took him a little while. He had to really work very hard to get it. And he gets it during our season 3. If it's useful, I could give a sort of bit of background to what we're doing really with Central Intelligence.
Yes, please.
The pitch, when we tried to sell the show initially, was whether we could create not a history, because we really didn't want it to be a history lesson. We wanted to create a workplace drama, essentially. People in offices, so a little bit like Mad Men, that was very much would take us through the periods from the 1940s through to 9/11. It's about the people in offices. It's about the people working inside the CIA. But the meetings and the conversations they have affect the world. They affect wars and coups and revolutions, all that sort of thing. But essentially, it's a workplace drama with these characters, where their decisions have global consequences.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but it seems almost, in a sense, the stories almost seem as if they're stranger than fiction, in a sense, because they are real, actual events that have happened, and the stories behind them, they're better than some films, actually, in some ways.
I mean, they're bizarre. Some of the assassination attempts. There's one project in the 60s where they tried to put a microphone in a cat, so that it would wander. And they trained the cat to go up to park benches where it would be fed. Or they tried to train a cat. I think, whoever came up with this project had probably never owned a cat, because they don't do what you want them to do. But yeah, it cost millions. They had to find a way of not only putting a microphone under the skin of the cat, so it's surgically put in. They had to have an antenna that kind of went up the tail. And it also, needed to be put in a way that A, the cat's body wouldn't reject it, and B, that you couldn't feel any bumps or anything if you petted the cat. It was a total disaster. It didn't work because when they tried to spy on these Russian agents in a park, the Russian agents decided not to sit on a bench but to go for a walk. So the whole thing was doomed from the start. And then the cat, I think, almost got run over. It got scared by a kid on a bike and then ran across the road and then almost got run over by a car. Yeah, they had some very strange, and they were just trying stuff out a lot of the time. And that was one. There was several attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro.
Yes.
One involved a sort of poisoned wetsuit. But mostly, I think the CIA was about trying to impose America's will on the world. It was very focused on stopping the spread of communism. And really what that involved was often interfering with the democratic process in other countries.
Absolutely. And some things don't change, but we'll leave that there.
And some things don't change. And the CIA, did have quite a lot of success as well. But often those successes were quiet successes because when it worked, then the world didn't really know about it.
True.
And they weren't always listened to. They conducted a very elaborate war game before America committed to Vietnam. And the war game convinced the CIA that they could not possibly win in Vietnam. And that was the information that they passed on to the president, LBJ at the time. But he was listening to other people within his administration, and they felt in the end that the real world would be different from the war game.
Well, in seasons 1 and 2, there are instances where suggestions are made for things that could be done to make what they want to happen, where there were alternatives used that didn't work. As a listener myself of it, I'd listen to it and think, even then, you've chosen the wrong way. If you'd have chosen this way, you can see it from a mile off, but it's like blinkered vision where it's whoever has the sway at the time that makes them decide where they're going to go. And it's fascinating to listen to this and think of the alternative, how it could have been as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stories that we're covering in the series are very prescient of today. Like you think of the situation in Iran now and what information President Trump would have been getting from different sources, and it could have gone in a number of ways. I guess we'll find out in years to come when documents are declassified, but I suspect the CIA would have given him the information that the regime in Iran would probably not crumble, after a bombing campaign, but he was probably listening to some hawks within the administration. I think often it does come down to who can bend the president's ear. And ultimately, the president has to make a decision. They're presented with information from different sources, and then they take a decision based on what they think is the most credible information they're getting.
To finish off, one of the great things about it as well is the fact that with your direction and with the way that it's written as well, hitting on what you've just said with the prescience of the stories that are in there, is that the character Eloise Page, portrayed by Kim Cattrall, at the end of each episode, so to speak, we almost always get her narration explaining to us, and throughout the episodes, saying to us, oh, you thought that this now was this way, but actually how this all started was, and then you go back into history with these events that have happened, and she sort of makes sense of how these things that are happening now, in a sense, are a causality from something that's happened back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and whenever these events in the show had happened.
Yeah, she's very useful as a narrator, I think, the Eloise Page character, because much less complicated than it actually is. It's really useful to have a guide taking you through it, but also because it makes it kind of effortless to listen to. She's taking the listener by the hand. It's not a really heavy listen.
No.
It's entertaining. And hopefully that comes a lot from her. She's the spine of the story, really. I mean, certainly Kim Cattrall playing that brings intelligence, a bit of glamour, sort of toughness, and definitely a strong sense of irony. She makes the history feel personal, and I think that's really what makes this not a history lesson. You really start to care about the characters, and it feels very personal. And she brings it up to the present. It's a little bit of a cheat in a way, because she died, long before the present day, but she's a slightly omniscient presence in this as well, so...
It wouldn't be the first time that a narrative character has been in a film or television show or anything that has actually passed away and then just a voice over.
Yes.
It's happened numerous times. Anyway, I wish I could speak with you for much longer, but you're really busy. So yes, season 3 of Central Intelligence comes out on July the 10th, which is tomorrow to us, and to those listening, it's 2 days prior. Thank you to the founder of Goldhawk Productions, Mr. John Scott Dryden. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to chat to you, Martin.
Thank you, John. Once more this week, I listened to some great podcasts and read interesting articles posted up by greater people than I. As well as the aforementioned podcast Bad Blood, Life of a Cancer, I also listened on Sunday to an episode of 99% Invisible that approached the people's concerns about the use of the M-dash, which, according to these people, proves that LLMs such as ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini and others have created these articles. In the episode, it shows the use of the M-dash going back to Shakespearean plays, poems, and stories. Other classic authors who have used it multiple times include Charles Dickens, Herman Melville, and Jane Austen. I have enjoyed the return of the audio drama Desert Skies, written, produced, and voiced by the incredibly talented Jared Carter, who has appeared on an episode of Pods Like Us before speaking about the show Desert Skies. I also finally completed the audio drama Strange Air, which had a great ending, much like all audio dramas I have listened to seem to have done. It's not like the damp squib ending of the television series Lost, that's for sure. I read 2 interesting Into the Podverse newsletters from Tony Doe, which look at a lot of subjects, including Pastor Chai appearing on LJE, The World of Travel, to discuss Nigeria's blue economy potential. He also mentioned his own discussion as well with the great John Savage, a wonder in the world of African podcasting. Dave Campbell's Substack saw a really good article provocatively titled, "We Are Not the 51st State of Podcasting. Canadian podcasters are looking to climb out from under the shadow of the American spotlight." I know, that is a long title, especially for the third full recording of this rundown. The article touches on the importance of the diverse cultures, languages and voices that Canada offer, which the US sanitizes for the most part into the English language. On the 15th of June 2026 episode of Daily Tips That May or May Not Help You, Ariel Nissenblatt gave us a tip about dishwashers and gave a shout out to her mom. I'm going to do the exact same here. Hey there, Ariel's mom. The episode of the podcast Into the Podverse from July the 1st included Tony Doe having a fascinating discussion with the great John Savage, CEO of the African Podcast Network. It gave us insight into how the people across Africa approach the podcasting industry differently. I messed up by double booking on Monday with 2 talks at the same time, and the choice ended up being the recording with David Guerrero for When There Was Fab, where myself and 2 co-hosts of mine on the show had a discussion about the Beatles' experience of playing in the Philippines, based on David's new book that is all about that very subject. The podcasting prompts from the week from Ariel Nissenblatt and Mercury Podcast were Day 6, show website, which basically is to work on the show website and make sure that it's up to date and easy to use, which reminded me that I need to get on with the marvzone.org because that has not been updated for a very long time. And I will be doing as soon as I've caught up with the backlog of episodes that need editing for Pods Like Us and for Toppermost of the Poppermost. Day 7 was the use of keywords so that it's easier for people to find subjects that they're looking for, and you might find new listeners through that. Day 8 was to create a lighter format to break up the bigger episodes with edits, such as what I'm doing here with Chronicles, because this is supposed to be an easier edit than the main episodes. Supposed to be. Day 9, claim your show on all podcast sites. That way you can get all of the comments and feedback from people on there. And Day 10, pitch yourself to feature on podcasting apps. You would be able to do that more so if you do the Day 9 prompt of claiming your show on those podcasting apps. Tuesday saw the Podbites newsletter take all day again. It's just so big all of the time. Uwe misses. On Wednesday, the discussion with Helen Quigley and Anna Pudderfoot about the audio drama Harry's Home, which was recorded in May, was released. The show sees the titular Harry, diagnosed with Alzheimer's, returning to the family home after an incident and disrupting the said family. In the 6th of July episode of Pod News Daily, James Cridland included a piece about the British Podcast Awards, telling us that 35 BBC shows are included. Not much diversity shown in there then for podcasters. On Thursday, I recorded the discussions featured earlier in this episode with Talib Jasir and John Scott Dryden. On Friday, I read Frank Rasiopi's Substack review of the podcast Distillate, which is about the history of alcoholic beverages. Another one for me there then. An episode of Podcast Editors Mastermind offered some great tips about filler words in podcasting. An interesting point was to give more leeway with conversational shows and tighter edits for factual, almost educational shows. As an example of this from my own experience, I edit Pods Like Us relatively loosely for the flow, but Toppermost of the Poppermost is a tight edit to get the facts out there without too much chaff. In the 7th of July episode of Podmastery, Podcast Insights, Neil Velio talks about how 77% of listeners give their full attention and 81% of shows are discovered through clips. One of the things mentioned by James Cridland on the 8th of July episode of Pod News Daily was the 11th London Podcast Festival with many shows to see and ways to take part. It is running between the 3rd and 13th of September. In the 8th of July episode of Into the Podverse, Tony Doe includes a recent incident where a podcaster told him that he didn't know of the words RSS feed. Tony said that he believes people should know this because of how important they are to podcasting. He's right. On the 9th of July, Stephanie Fuccio put out a very interesting Substack article about finding the right titles for a podcast and 2 ways that it can gain listeners. Stephanie also wrote a great article on the 7th of July about the difference between ChatGPT and Gemini in her own experience of working with them. So with that, I wish all of you podders the best. Pods Like Us is available anywhere that podcasts can be found, and all of the links to the social media and email are available on the opening page of themarvzone.org. The show is distributed and sponsored by RSS.com, and we thank them for their support. Please rate and review the show on the platform that you are listening or viewing the episode on. All feedback is gratefully received, as it helps to know if there is anything that needs to be looked at. Thank you for listening, and I hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us Chronicles.
Keep the Flame Alive is the podcast for fans of the Olympics and Paralympics. Every week, join your Olympic aunties, Jill Jaracz,
Go ball, I'm gonna go and see it, go ball,
and Allison Brown,
I am a Swedish Viking,
for interviews that are smart.
How do you plan the strategy for each round?
Fun.
You have skates. Do you wear socks?
And ask the questions you know you want to ask.
Is there ever a moment where you just looked at these guys and thought to yourself, what am I doing on this mat?
We cover the Olympics and Paralympics like no one else.
What was going on with all of this cleaning of the balls? We had the princess of the pool, we had the flying fish, we had the silver bullet, and the beast.
Find Keep the Flame Alive at flamealivepod.com or on your favorite podcast app.
I saw them all. I stayed up and then woke up and watched more.
And until next time, keep the flame alive.
This is why I love the Olympics.